The slap cracked through the air like a whip. Every sound inside Luxline Boutique vanished at once, leaving only the ragged sound of Grace's breathing and the faint tremor of a phone someone was holding up to record. Noon sunlight poured through the glass roof of Sunset Plaza Mall. Grace Miller, 27 years old, in a white blouse and a neatly pressed gray skirt, stood frozen behind the counter. Her cheek burned a metallic taste spreading across her tongue. She could not believe a single furious hand could turn her into the center of such a humiliating scene. In front of her, the blonde woman, about 55, wearing an expensive cream-colored suit, kept her chin lifted in pride. That's what happens when you forget to respect your superiors. Her voice fell onto the glossy tile floor like a blade. The crowd was silent. A few sympathetic eyes, a few curious smirks. Then, one heartbeat later, sound returned whispers and rustles, while inside Grace, everything was hollow. That morning, she had arrived 30 minutes early as always. She adjusted the display lights, straightened every fold of silk, arranged the labels by shade, wine ash gray, cobalt blue emerald. In the world of luxury, perfection wasn't the goal, it was the entry requirement. Grace knew that better than anyone. After her divorce, she rented a small apartment in Riverside and clung to this job like a lifeline in a sea of debt. She reminded herself every day, don't give anyone a reason to replace you. The woman had walked in at the busiest hour. Through the glass, Grace caught her reflection. First, wavy hair, dark red lipstick, a brand new Chanel purse hanging loosely on her wrist. I need help now. There's a corporate party tonight. I need the perfect dress. The request sounded more like a command. Grace smiled, hiding her exhaustion behind gentle eyes. Of course. Would you prefer something minimalist or something that makes a statement? She offered a burgundy gown with subtle beading waved away. Too ordinary. A gray draped one. Too dull. A cobalt blue dress with sharp lines. Looks like a secretary's outfit. Each rejection Grace answered with a deep breath and relaxed shoulders, remembering the first rule of customer service: patience, first pride later. But contempt has its own metallic scent, the smell of someone convinced they are superior. It began to thicken in her throat. On a bench near the entrance, Nathan Carter sat quietly dressed in a black suit, the steel edge of his watch glinting on his wrist. His eyes never touched his phone. They followed Grace's every movement. He watched her shift her tone slow when calming a client, brisk when saving time, like a musician playing a piece rehearsed too many times. In his mind, an old door creaked open. His grandfather's will, the number 32, engraved in his memory. And the question he'd been avoiding for months, whether a marriage on paper was worth protecting the empire he had built with his own hands. But before he thought of himself, he thought of the woman being cornered the way she held her dignity under pressure, swallowing humiliation with a thin, steady smile. Do you even understand the importance of first impressions? The woman tilted her head, examining Grace like a flaw in a mirror. The crowd had grown. A young man lifted his phone recording with a shaky frame. Grace spoke softly. If you could tell me more about the event, I can suggest something closer to what you need. Wrong. One word can spark an explosion. Are you calling me difficult? The woman's voice shattered the air. Her next words came sharp and fast. A salesgirl lecturing me on style. Look at yourself. The word look shot straight into Grace, cutting through the white fabric, striking the fragile self-respect she'd barely rebuilt after her divorce. She squared her shoulders, hung the red dress back on the rack, and forced her breath to stay calm. I only want you to leave here with something you truly love. Then the hand came up quick, cold, without warning. The sound of skin meeting skin made everyone flinch. Phones lowered. Eyes widened. A child hid behind her mother. Grace gripped the counter's edge, forcing her knees not to give way. In her head, her mother's voice surfaced like a thread of light. Don't let anyone decide your worth. But under dozens of staring eyes, any sense of worth felt small. And just as her dignity was slipping from her grasp, a voice sliced through the air like a blade. Touch my wife again and see what happens. Not loud, not shouted, just steady and cold. Nathan rose to his feet. The crowd parted. Sunlight from the glass roof spilled over his shoulders, framing him like a figure stepped out of film. The woman froze, the red on her lips curving into unease. Time slowed. The mark on Grace's cheek deepened to crimson. In Nathan's chest, a decision locked into place, and around them the silent witnesses held their breath waiting as the story turned a moment when the powerless found their voice and power was forced to stand in the place it truly belonged. The air grew dense, every movement suspended. Light reflected off the white tiles gleaming across Nathan's face, where every line carried a dangerous calm. He didn't need to raise his voice yet. Every word he spoke made the room tremble. You just slapped my wife. One sentence, firm and final, not a breath wasted. The woman blinked, stunned, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Your wife? That salesgirl? You must be joking. Nathan took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. I'm not joking. I saw everything. You insulted, humiliated, and assaulted her in front of dozens of witnesses. I have enough people here to testify, even video evidence. His eyes flicked toward a few, who still held up their phones. They immediately lowered them, silent now, but their gaze stayed locked on the scene unfolding before them. Grace stood frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could hear her own breath. She had no idea what was happening. A stranger had walked in, claimed to be her husband, and was now facing down a powerful woman as if he had the entire world behind him. She wanted to stop him, but her throat tightened. All she could do was watch. The woman gave a sharp, nervous laugh, trying to regain control. You have no authority here. This is a public store. You should leave before I call security. Nathan's lips curved into a faint smile that never reached his eyes. You can call them if you want, but they'll be coming for me. His words fell like steel. At that moment, 2 security guards appeared at the door. One of them gave Nathan a subtle nod, a small gesture that sent ripples of shock through the store. Is there a problem here, Mr. Carter? One guard asked. This woman just assaulted one of my employees. Nathan said, his voice low and steady. I want her escorted out of the mall immediately. The woman's mouth fell open, but no sound came out. Mr. Carter. Carter, who? She stammered, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. You're Nathan Carter. A wave of murmurs swept through the boutique. That name, who in Austin didn't know it? The heir of Carter Innovations. The 33-year-old billionaire who had turned his family's security software into a global tech empire. A man who rarely appeared in public, yet every appearance made headlines. The color drained from her face. I didn't know. Now you do? Nathan interrupted. And I'll make sure no store in this mall ever welcomes you again. Leave. The 2 guards stepped forward. One spoke politely but firmly. Ma'am, please come with us. The woman struggled. You can't do this. I'll sue. Go ahead, Nathan replied, his tone calm as if commenting on the weather. My legal team will handle it. The store fractured into 100 silent stares. The woman was led away, her high heels clacking sharply against the cold tiles, each step sounding like a late apology. The door closed behind her, and suddenly the boutique was so quiet they could hear the soft hum of the air conditioner above. Grace was still standing there, trembling. She wanted to say thank you, but her lips wouldn't move. Nathan turned toward her, his expression softening, no longer the commanding CEO, but a man genuinely concerned. "Are you all right?" Grace nodded faintly, her throat tight. "Come with me," he said gently but firmly. He led her past the display aisles and through the small door behind the counter, the one marked for staff only. The break room was dimly lit, the scent of perfume lingering in the air. Grace leaned against the wall, her cheeks still burning, her pulse unsteady. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Why did you do that? Why did you say I was your wife?" Nathan stood across from her, hands in his pockets, his tone deep but sincere. "Because I saw everything. And I knew if I didn't step in, she wouldn't stop. People like her only understand one language: power." Grace looked at him, her eyes still wet. "But you don't even know who I am." "I don't need to," Nathan said. "I know you're someone who kept her dignity while others lost theirs. And that's enough." His voice was low, but something in it made Grace want to believe him. She didn't yet realize that at that moment in that small room behind the store, a contract was being written in fate, one that would change her life forever. Outside, the mall's noise slowly returned, the world spinning as if nothing had happened, except for the two people inside that quiet room who had just stepped into a new chapter of destiny. The soft yellow light from the ceiling lamp fell across Grace's face, highlighting the faint redness still lingering on her cheek. She stood leaning against the shelf, hands clasped tightly together to hide her trembling. Outside, the store had returned to its usual rhythm, the click of heels, the rustle of wrapping paper, the sound of the glass door opening and closing. But inside that small room, time had stopped. Nathan Carter still stood there, tall, composed, a crisp white shirt beneath a fitted black suit, his sharp gaze that of a man accustomed to making decisions every day. Yet his voice now was low, steady, and unexpectedly gentle. "Sit down," he said, pulling the only chair in the room toward her. "You need a moment to rest." Grace hesitated, then slowly sat down. She couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. I don't even know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Nathan replied. "I only did what anyone should do when they see something wrong." The words sounded simple, yet to Grace, they felt like a touch on an old wound. Since the divorce, she had learned to endure, to stay silent when disrespected, to swallow her tears, just to keep a fragile job. It had been so long since anyone had stood up for her. "You shouldn't let people treat you like that," Nathan said, his eyes thoughtful. "No one has the right to humiliate you, no matter how much money or status they have." Grace gave a faint laugh, her voice hoarse. "That's easy to say. But I need this job. I can't afford to lose it." "You won't," Nathan replied simply. "If necessary, I can make sure of that." The statement made Grace look up, her gaze meeting his. For a moment, she saw something in his eyes, not just power, but the steady certainty of a man who had faced storms and won. "What's your name?" he asked. "Grace. Grace Miller." Nathan nodded, repeating it slowly as if committing it to memory. "Grace Miller. That's a strong name." She smiled faintly, but still didn't understand why he was here speaking to her this way. "You really didn't have to do this for me. I'm just a sales clerk." Nathan looked at her directly. "No, Grace. You're not just anything. You're someone who kept her dignity when others threw theirs away. That's rare, especially in this world." She fell silent, her hands still intertwined. The small room grew heavier with the weight of something unspoken. Then Nathan exhaled softly, as if arriving at a decision. "I have a proposal. Something that will sound strange, but I want you to hear me out before you say no." Grace frowned slightly. "A proposal?" He nodded. "Yes. I need a wife." The air shattered like glass. Grace's eyes widened, convinced she had misheard. "What did you just say? I need a wife? In name only a temporary marriage." Grace let out a startled laugh, the sound awkward and disbelieving. You're joking, right? You just saved me and now you want to marry me? Not a real marriage, Nathan said slowly. It's an arrangement for 1 year. You'll be paid enough to change your entire life. Grace stared at him, unable to blink. She couldn't tell if he was insane or if this was some test, a rich man's game to see if loyalty could be bought. Why me? She asked, her voice quiet. Nathan leaned against the table, his gaze so serious it pinned her in place. Because I trust you. I've been watching you all afternoon. You don't know me, but I know you're honest, proud, and not someone who sells herself for money. And that's exactly why you're the only person I can trust with this. She still didn't believe him. You could hire anyone, a model, an actress, someone more experienced. Those people would use me, he replied. I don't need someone chasing fame. I need someone real, grounded. Someone like you. Grace leaned back in the chair, her heartbeat unsteady. I don't understand. Why do you need a wife? Nathan was silent for a moment, then said quietly, Because of my grandfather's will. If I'm not married before my 32nd birthday, all my shares in Carter Innovations will be transferred to a charitable foundation. I have 6 months left. The room fell into silence. The story sounded unreal. Grace couldn't speak, only looked at him, the man who had silenced an entire shopping mall with one sentence. He stood there, steady, powerful. Yet in his eyes, there was a loneliness he couldn't hide. I know this sounds insane, he continued, his voice low and sincere. But if you agree, I'll pay you $5 million after 1 year. You'll have freedom, a future, and I'll keep my company. Grace stared at him, her mind spinning. Part of her wanted to run. Yet another part couldn't look away from those eyes, the eyes of a man who had lost more than she ever had. And in that moment, she knew her life had just opened a door no one could have predicted. Grace sat in silence, her eyes wide as she stared at the man in front of her. Every word he spoke seemed to thicken the air inside the small room. $5 million? She repeated, her voice hoarse, filled with both disbelief and fear. That's right, Nathan replied, his tone steady, neither boastful nor pleading. After 1 year, once the conditions in the will are fulfilled, you'll receive the full amount. All I need is your presence, a legal wife on paper. Grace let out a hollow laugh, one that carried no trace of amusement. You're talking about a fake marriage, living for a year with a complete stranger just to save your fortune. Nathan nodded slightly. I know it sounds insane, but I'm a practical man. I don't believe in love at first sight, and I don't have time for a real relationship. What I need is a solution. She searched his voice for a hint of irony, some sign that he was joking, but there was none, only a calm, unnerving seriousness. And me, Grace said slowly, I'm just a tool in that solution. Nathan's eyes softened. No, you're an opportunity for both of us to change. The words made Grace pause, perhaps because for the first time in her life someone had called her an opportunity instead of a burden. But reason pulled her back. You don't know anything about me. I could be the worst person in the world. No, Nathan said quietly. I saw you today calm when insulted, composed when humiliated. Someone like that can't be bad. You know how to control pain, and that's something money can't buy. The room fell silent again. The hum of the air conditioner blended with the rapid rhythm of Grace's heartbeat. In front of her was an offer that could open a new future or lead her into a void. She tried to steady her voice. Suppose I say yes. What would I have to do? It's simple, Nathan said. We marry legally, appear together at a few social events, maintain the image of a stable marriage, no emotional ties, no physical demands. After 1 year, we end it quietly. You have the money, I keep my freedom. Grace lowered her head, tracing meaningless patterns on her knee with her fingers. It all sounded like a dream turned upside down, where happiness and logic had traded places. Part of her wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but another part couldn't deny this might be her only way out. "Why me?" she whispered. "You're surrounded by women, wealthy, beautiful, famous. They'd say yes without a second thought." Nathan smiled faintly, a sad, almost weary smile. "That's exactly why I can't choose them. They see me as Nathan Carter, not as a man. But you, Grace, you looked at me like a stranger, not with fear, not with flattery. That's what I need most, the truth." Grace lifted her gaze, and his eyes made it hard to breathe. In them she saw a loneliness she recognized, the same one she had seen in her own reflection every morning. She swallowed hard. $5 million, that's a lifetime for me. I can't deny that. But I don't want to sell myself to become someone's joke. "You won't be a joke," Nathan said, his voice low and deliberate, as if he wanted her to feel each word. "I don't play with anyone's dignity. If you agree, this arrangement will be fully protected by a legal contract. No one will be able to hurt you, not even me." Grace fell silent for a long time. In her mind, images overlapped the shabby apartment, the unpaid bills, the sleepless nights worrying about rent. Then her mother's face from memory appeared, the woman who once told her, "Sometimes you have to step into uncertainty to find real opportunity." When Grace finally looked up, her eyes glistened. "I need time to think." Nathan nodded, not pressing her. He reached into his pocket and placed a business card gently on the table. "This is my direct number. No assistants, no secretaries. Call me when you're ready." He turned to leave, but before stepping out, he stopped. "Grace," he said, without looking back, "sometimes the craziest things are the only paths that lead to freedom." The door closed behind him, leaving Grace alone in the quiet room. She looked down at the card, her hand trembling slightly. Nathan Carter, CEO, Carter Innovations. The silver letters shimmered under the yellow light. And in that moment, she knew the humiliating slap that afternoon might have been destiny's push, turning her life onto a path from which there was no return. Grace's small apartment sat on the 4th floor of the Riverside complex, where the walls were stained yellow and the hallway always smelled faintly of fast food. That night, light rain swept across Austin, each drop tapping gently against the window, like someone knocking from the other side of fate. Grace sat in an old chair by the dining table, staring at the silver business card Nathan Carter had left behind. The words, Carter, Innovations. Nathan Carter, CEO, glimmered under the warm light, elegant yet distant. She held it in her hand, the metallic chill seeping through her skin. $5 million, she whispered, as if reciting a curse. It was an amount she had never dared to dream of. With that kind of money, she could erase her debts, go back to college, buy a small house on the outskirts of the city, and for the first time, live without fear of being fired, judged, or forgotten. But then the image from earlier that day returned, the middle-aged woman's hand, striking her the sharp crack of the slap. The curious stares and Nathan's cold, steady voice cutting through the chaos. "Touch my wife again, and see what happens." He had protected her, saved her from humiliation. Yet now he had made an offer that left her unsure whether to feel grateful or afraid. Grace leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, Eleanor Miller, the woman who always believed life was a series of choices between courage and cowardice. "You can't control what others do to you," her mother used to say, "but you can choose how you respond." Grace let out a quiet laugh. "What would you say now, Mom?" Maybe her mother would tell her not to trust rich men. Or maybe she'd say, "When destiny knocks open the door, even if it's just to see who's on the other side." She glanced at the clock. Nearly midnight. The apartment was silent except for the rain. In the dim light, the business card seemed to glow. Grace picked up her phone, typed in the number printed on it, then stopped at the last digit. Her heart raced. She set the phone down, then picked it up again, then set it down once more. She turned on the television, but her mind couldn't focus. A new segment was airing footage of Sunset Plaza Mall. The headline read, "Incident at Luxury Boutique. CEO Nathan Carter intervenes praised for his actions." She froze. The video showed Nathan standing in the store, his expression calm but fierce, his voice clear. "You just slapped my wife." The entire internet was talking about him. A hashtag was trending everywhere, "Stand with Grace." She, an ordinary woman, had suddenly become the center of a storm she never asked for. Her phone buzzed a message from a coworker. "Grace, the internet is calling you the girl from Luxline. You're famous." She stared at the message, a dull ache in her chest. Famous for a slap, for a humiliation she never wanted. The rain kept falling. Grace turned off the TV and sat in the darkness. Then Nathan's words echoed in her mind. "You're the one who kept your dignity when others lost theirs." Maybe just once, she should believe in something bigger than fear. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the thin curtains, landing on the business card on the table. Grace wore a white blouse, her hair tied neatly back, and took a deep breath. Her hand trembled, but she pressed the numbers with purpose. 3 rings. Then a deep, familiar voice answered, "Nathan Carter." Grace swallowed hard before speaking softly. "This is Grace Miller. I've thought about it all night, and I agree." There was silence on the other end for a few seconds. Then Nathan chuckled quietly, a sound that carried the warmth of someone who had expected this outcome all along. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Once we begin, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," she replied, her voice steadier than she expected. "I've spent half my life being afraid. Now I want to know what happens if I choose courage." "Very well," Nathan said. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Carter." The call ended. The room was still the same old cramped, but suddenly it felt larger. Grace looked out the window. The rain had stopped and the sun was rising over the horizon. She smiled, not because of the $5 million, not because of the title she had just agreed to carry, but because for the first time in years she had chosen her life with her own trembling hands. 2 days later, Grace stood before the towering glass building bearing the name Carter Innovations. The front facade reflected the Texas noon sunlight, gleaming like a giant mirror that revealed the hesitation in her heart. Employees in suits hurried past, each one brisk and confident. And there she was, in a white blouse, a gray pencil skirt, and a pair of worn heels, standing on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath as if preparing to step into another world. Inside the lobby, the air smelled of sandalwood, blended with a hint of mint, cool and luxurious. Light bounced off every surface. A brunette receptionist smiled as Grace approached. "Hello, I have an appointment with Mr. Carter." Grace said softly, but clearly. "Yes, Ms. Miller," the receptionist replied, at once her smile turning more professional. "Mr. Carter is expecting you on the 42nd floor. This way, please." The 42nd floor. The number alone made Grace's palms sweat. The elevator stopped so smoothly it barely made a sound. When the doors slid open, a long hallway stretched ahead, glass walls overlooking the entire skyline of Austin. At the end of the hall stood Nathan Carter, his back turned, hands in his pockets, his silhouette framed against the blue sky and the rise of skyscrapers. "You're here," he said, without turning his low voice enough to make her heartbeat falter. Grace walked toward him. "You told me to come sign the contract." "Yes," he said, turning to face her, his eyes calm and unreadable. "I've always believed that the most important things in life should be written down, not just spoken." On the dark wooden table before them lay a thick stack of papers bound in leather. "The marriage contract," Nathan said, pulling out a chair for her. Grace sat down, trying to hide her unease. She flipped through the pages, detailed terms, rights, obligations, a duration of 1 year. The printed words were cold but precise. This marriage is entirely voluntary, involves no emotional attachment, and requires no physical intimacy. Nathan spoke only when necessary. Your lawyer can review it if you wish. I don't want you to feel pressured. Grace let out a faint laugh. Do you really think I have a lawyer? Now you can afford to hire one, he said lightly, as if that were the most natural thing in the world. She looked at him, uncertain whether to feel grateful or offended. Nathan Carter, the man of power, discipline, and mystery, was handing her a piece of paper that could change her life completely. There's one more condition, he said, his voice dropping slightly, his gaze deep and steady. For the duration of the year, you'll live with me. Not because I want to control you, but because it has to look real. People must believe this marriage is genuine. Grace blinked. Live with you? Yes. At my estate in Westlake Hills. You'll have your own room, staff, and privacy. But in public, in front of the media friends and the board, you'll be Grace Carter. She looked at him and saw pure seriousness in his eyes. No charm, no manipulation, just the logic of a man accustomed to control. Don't you think this is going too far? Nathan paused. Do you know what makes a person successful? Grace? What? The courage to cross the lines others are too afraid to touch. She stayed silent, her hand resting on the unsigned contract. Inside her, everything was at war. One side filled with fear of being used, of becoming someone's tool. The other carried a fragile hope, the belief that this might be the one opportunity she would never see again. Nathan poured a glass of water and slid it toward her. You don't have to decide now, but I hope you'll choose courage like you did that day. Grace looked up. That day, the day you were slapped. You could have cried, you could have run, but you didn't. You stood tall. That's why I trust you. His voice was low and sincere enough to make her chest tighten. She looked down at the contract, the black fountain pen resting beside it. Sunlight glinted across the table, lighting up the line that read Grace Miller. She picked up the pen and took a deep breath. Nathan spoke softly, almost as a reminder. No one is forcing you. Grace signed with a firm stroke. I know. I'm choosing this. Nathan nodded, gathering the papers, a flicker of relief crossing his face before disappearing. Good. From today you begin the biggest role of your life. Grace smiled faintly, though her hands trembled. A role? No, Nathan corrected, his eyes turning toward the sky through the glass wall. Not a role, a life. A story neither of us knows the ending to. And as the office door closed behind her, Grace knew she had crossed the line from the woman who was once overlooked to the one who was chosen. But she also sensed that in this marriage, built on pretense, the greatest danger might not be Nathan's secrets, but her own heart. That afternoon, the black Bentley rolled out of downtown Austin, heading toward Westlake Hills, the suburb known as the place where the sky meets the water. Through the car window, Grace watched as green hills stretched endlessly, the lake shimmered in the golden glow of sunset, and mansions floated like clouds on the horizon. With every curve, every passing mile, she felt herself moving further away from the world she knew. Away from the smell of cheap detergent and the flickering fluorescent lights of her old Riverside apartment. The driver opened the automated gate. The wrought iron doors parted slowly, revealing an estate that spanned nearly 3,000 square meters. 2 rows of oak trees lined the driveway, leading to a lush green lawn and a pool that reflected the blazing red sun. The main house towered ahead, its glass walls capturing the entire evening sky. Grace took a deep breath. It wasn't just a house, it was another world, Nathan was waiting at the entrance, no jacket, just a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and a silver watch glinting on his wrist. He looked at her with a calmness that carried something unspoken. Not joy, not power, but the cautious curiosity of a man opening his life to something unfamiliar. "Welcome to your new home," he said. "From now on, this is where you'll live at least for the next year." Grace pressed her lips together and nodded softly. "It's beautiful. I don't think I've ever been anywhere like this. I hope you'll be comfortable. Everything you might need has been prepared." The door opened, releasing a wave of cool air laced with the scent of oak. The high ceiling echoed with their footsteps, while light from the crystal chandelier poured down like a waterfall. Grace stood still, feeling small and out of place. A silver-haired butler stepped forward and bowed. "Mr. Carter, Madam's room is ready." Grace flinched slightly at the word Madam. Nathan glanced at her, a faint smile curving his lips. "You'll have to get used to being called that." The staircase curved upward to the second floor. Grace's room was at the end of the hall behind a dark wooden door that opened into a bright, sunlit space. The decor was simple but elegant. A large bed draped in white linen, an oak desk, and wide windows overlooking the lake. On the desk sat a vase of freshly cut white lilies. "Mr. Carter said, 'You value peace and quiet,'" the butler said gently. "So this room is in the farthest corner." Grace nodded slightly. She closed the door behind her and sank into a chair, her heart still pounding. Everything was too perfect, almost frighteningly so. That evening, when she came downstairs for dinner, Nathan was already seated at the long dining table. Warm light glowed across his black suit and composed face. On the table was a light meal salmon salad and white wine. "You still don't seem to believe any of this is real," he said. "Don't you think it's all a bit fast?" Grace asked. "A week ago I was standing behind a sales counter, and now you're Grace Carter," he interrupted gently with a faint smile. "And the first thing you need to learn is to believe in your role." She looked at him half amused, half uneasy. "You make it sound like I'm acting in a movie." "In a way you are," Nathan replied evenly. "Everyone out there is watching us every move, every photo, every rumor. If we don't play our parts well, the entire plan falls apart." Grace set down her fork and knife, her gaze steady on him. "And what if one day I don't want to play anymore?" Nathan was quiet for a moment, then spoke slowly. "Then you just need to remember why I chose you. You're not an actress, you're real. And sometimes the truth is more convincing than any performance." His words struck something deep within her. In his eyes, she caught a glimpse of something weary, a quiet exhaustion, as if the powerful man before her had long stopped believing in anything beyond logic. After dinner, he walked her to the base of the stairs. "Starting tomorrow, someone will guide you through what's expected events, media appearances, and a few house rules. If you need anything, just tell me." "Thank you," Grace said softly. Nathan paused on the last step, his gaze softening. "I should be the one thanking you. You just saved my future, Grace." She watched him walk down the long hallway, his steps steady and precise, like the ticking of an old clock. The door to his room closed at the end of the corridor, and in that quiet moment, Grace realized something. This marriage was more than a contract. It was a test of trust, of boundaries, and of a heart she had yet to discover she might lose. Grace's first morning in Nathan Carter's mansion began with the soft sound of a piano playing somewhere in the distance. The melody was light as mist fading gently into the still air of Westlake Hills. She opened her eyes, taking a few seconds to remember where she was. The room was wide and bright sunlight filtering through the curtains, the faint scent of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. On the bedside table lay a neatly folded note. "Breakfast is served from 7 to 9. Don't forget to meet me at 9:30. N." Grace smiled, faintly surprised yet strangely comforted. Since stepping into Nathan's world, everything had been planned to perfection. Even the smallest details carried the feeling of a flawless system or a beautiful cage. The dining room was on the ground floor overlooking the pool. As she entered, the sunlight reflected off the water, bathing the entire room in gold. A middle-aged woman in a black uniform approached with a polite bow. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter. I'm Mrs. Hollis, the head housekeeper. From today, I'll help you get familiar with life in the estate." Grace hesitated for a moment. Even though she had been warned, hearing someone call her Mrs. Carter still felt strange. "Mr. Carter is in his office." Mrs. Hollis continued, her tone gentle yet formal. "He asked me to bring you to him after breakfast." Grace nodded and chose a simple meal, toast, eggs, and coffee. She ate slowly, listening to the wind brushing against the glass doors, watching the luxurious scene before her, while silently wondering, what am I really doing here? At 9:30 sharp, Grace entered Nathan's office, a space filled with natural light, abstract paintings, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. Nathan sat behind his desk, the sunlight highlighting the sharp line of his nose and the cool steadiness in his eyes. He gestured for her to sit. "Did you sleep well?" "Quite well," Grace replied, trying to keep her voice even. "Good," Nathan said, his lips curving faintly. "This house can make it hard to believe it's real. But Grace, you need to remember something from today. On everything you do might be watched, not by me, but by the world outside." Grace frowned slightly. "You mean the media? And the partners, the board of directors, and everyone waiting for me to make a mistake? They know I've never been married, so the fact that I suddenly have a wife has made everyone curious. They'll study every detail, the way you look at me, the way I touch you, the way we appear together." He opened a thin folder and slid it across the desk toward her. Inside was a schedule of events, dinners, press conferences, and a list of people she was expected to know as part of her new role. "You'll have a personal coach," Nathan said. "They'll train you to handle the media, choose your wardrobe, and learn basic etiquette. I won't let anyone look down on you." Grace glanced through the pages, a faint smile touching her lips. "You really planned everything, didn't you?" Nathan leaned back in his chair, his voice slow and even. "I don't believe in luck. My entire life, the only thing I've relied on is a plan." The words sounded confident, yet to Grace, they carried the quiet confession of someone deeply lonely. "Don't you ever get tired of calculating everything?" she asked softly. Nathan looked slightly surprised, his gaze gentler now. "That's a good question. But if I stopped calculating, I would have lost everything a long time ago." In that moment, Grace felt the distance between them more clearly than ever. He lived in a world of numbers and power, where mistakes had no place. She, who had once counted every dollar to pay rent, was now sitting in a room where a single lamp cost more than her yearly salary. "So what am I in your plan?" she asked quietly. Nathan was silent for a few seconds. "You're the trust I never had before, a gamble I chose to take." Grace looked at him for a long time, unsure whether to feel honored or afraid. In his eyes she caught something strange, a faint glimmer of hope, as if this man who had long stopped believing in anything was beginning to wonder if life could be different with someone unlike everyone else by his side. Nathan stood and closed the folder. "This afternoon we'll have a press announcement. The world will see Grace Carter for the first time. Be ready." As he walked out, Grace remained seated. She reached into her pocket and touched the old business card still tucked inside her heart, tightening slightly. From a single slap, she had stepped into a world where every glance carried weight. But deep down, she had no idea that from this moment on, another secret was beginning to unfold, not about the contract, but about who Nathan Carter truly was. That afternoon, the sky over Austin turned a deep golden shade like aged wine. From the high window, Grace looked down at the stream of cars moving along the boulevard. her heart stretched tight as a drawn string. Below, in front of this Four Seasons hotel, dozens of cameras were pointed toward the main entrance. Reporters, television crews, bloggers, financial media, everyone was waiting. They wanted to see the mysterious woman who had made Nathan Carter, the famously cold and unattached billionaire, suddenly announce his marriage. In the suite, 3 people were bustling around her: a makeup artist, a stylist, and a young assistant. The chosen gown was emerald green with an elegant V-shaped neckline refined enough to convey status, but modest enough to hide the nerves of someone new to this world. Grace looked at herself in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back, a woman with softly curled hair, confident eyes, and straightened shoulders. But deep inside, her heart pounded fast, and uneven, stirred by an old familiar fear, the fear of being seen, of being judged. A knock came at the door. Nathan walked in. Dressed in a black suit and gray tie, he carried the quiet authority of someone who could make a room tilt toward him. He stopped at the doorway, his gaze softening slightly when he saw her. "You look incredible," he said, his voice low and genuine. Grace pressed her lips together, uncertain. "I just hope I don't trip on the red carpet." Nathan smiled and stepped closer, extending his hand. "Then hold on to me." The words were light, but they made Grace pause. When his hand touched hers, a strange current ran through her, warm and steady, yet commanding. They walked together down the hallway. In the elevator, neither spoke. Only the soft hum of metal and the echo of Grace's heartbeat filled the silence. When the doors opened, a sea of flashing lights burst before them. Voices called out, cameras clicked, shouts rose like waves. Nathan squeezed her hand gently and murmured, "Look straight ahead. You're Grace Carter. Not a sales clerk, not the woman who got slapped. My wife." They stepped out. Everything seemed to slow. The wind lifted the hem of her gown. The lights caught the calm smile on Nathan's face. Reporters pushed forward, microphones raised high. "Mr. Carter, is the marriage rumor true? Where did you meet her? Mrs. Carter, how does it feel to be the wife of the most powerful man in Austin?" Grace lifted her chin. In that moment, the noise faded. All she saw were curious faces, probing eyes, and through it all, Nathan's hand gripping hers, steady and unshakable. She smiled, her voice soft but clear. "We met on a day no one expected. Sometimes the worst moments lead you to the best things." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. Nathan glanced at her, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, before a quiet smile appeared on his lips. For a few seconds, the reporters fell silent, just a few, but it was enough for Grace to feel she was standing exactly where she was meant to be. The announcement ended, and they left the hotel with the sound of cameras still flashing behind them. In the car, Nathan loosened his tie and leaned back. "You did well," he said. Grace laughed softly. "I just told the truth. So much truth." "It silenced an entire press room," he replied, glancing at her, his tone laced with amused surprise. "You have a talent you don't even know." She turned toward him, the golden sunset painting his face in warm light. "I only did the one thing I still know how to do, keep my dignity." Nathan nodded, his voice deepening. "And that's why I chose you." The car glided across the bridge over Lake Austin. The water reflected the last light of day, glittering like liquid gold. They sat in silence, each lost in thought. Grace touched the ring on her finger, a wedding band that wasn't real yet. The feeling it brought was unmistakably so. A quiet intuition stirred within her. This was more than the beginning of a contract. It was the spark of something deeper, something neither of them was ready to name. And in that fading sunset, with the city rushing past, Grace Miller, now Grace Carter, knew that for the first time in years, she was no longer hiding from the light. That night, Austin was unusually quiet. In the mansion perched on the hills of Westlake, the soft hum of crickets mingled with the gentle sound of lake water lapping against the stone walls. Grace sat alone on the balcony, a thin shawl wrapped around her shoulders, gazing at the city lights flickering in the distance. The wedding announcement had ended 3 hours ago, yet its echoes still lingered in her. Not the sound of cameras or the polite compliments, but Nathan's expression as they left the hall, half proud, half distant, as though his thoughts were somewhere far beyond reach. Her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a flood of headlines. Billionaire Nathan Carter secretly marries a mysterious woman. The woman who melted the coldest heart in tech. From sales clerk to billionaire's wife in just 1 month. Grace turned off the screen and set the phone aside. The words caught in her throat. They didn't know the truth, the contract, or the fear that gripped her every time she had to step into the role of the perfect Mrs. Carter. And none of them knew that behind the calm smile she wore for the cameras was still the woman marked by a slap, by years of humiliation. Can't sleep. Nathan's voice came from behind her. He stood at the doorway holding 2 glasses of wine, his shadow stretching across the tile floor in the moonlight. No, Grace replied, taking the glass he offered. I'm not used to the whole world knowing my name. Nathan gave a faint smile and leaned against the railing. You'll get used to it. They'll talk, then they'll move on. The media lives on curiosity but dies from boredom, so we just wait until they get bored. Exactly. But until then, we live as if everything is real. Grace swirled the wine in her glass, the deep red reflecting against her fingertips. Do you live like this all the time? Pretending, performing, arranging everything? Nathan was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When you're in my position, you'll understand. Everyone wants a piece of you. Your money, your influence, your name. No one truly sees you. I just learned to live in a way that keeps me from being hurt. Maybe Grace said softly, that's what makes us alike. Nathan turned toward her, his eyes softening. You think I'm like you? You hide behind power. I hide behind a smile. We're both afraid of being hurt again. He laughed quietly, a sound short but genuine. Grace Miller. You sound like someone who can read my mind. And you, she replied, make it impossible for me to decide whether to fear you or trust you. Silence stretched between them. The night breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine. Nathan lifted his glass, touching it gently to hers. To this contract, he said to what we're both risking. Grace met his gaze, her glass clinking softly against his. To trust the one thing I think you've never really had. The wine slid down her throat, warm and bittersweet. Nathan looked at her for a long time, then spoke in a voice so low it almost disappeared into the wind. You're wrong. I'm starting to trust not in plans, but in the person standing in front of me. The words made Grace's heart skip a beat. For a fleeting moment, the line between truth and illusion blurred. His eyes were no longer cold, but held a tenderness she had never seen before. A gust of wind swept across the balcony, blowing her hair loose. Nathan reached out, brushing a stray strand away from her face, his movement slow and hesitant. We can make the world believe, he murmured, but I'm not sure if I'm still pretending. Grace took a step back. Her heart tangled. She knew she shouldn't let emotions interfere. This was just a contract, a year $5 million, and freedom. Yet when the moonlight glimmered in Nathan's eyes, she realized that the real danger didn't lie in the contract's terms, but in the feelings quietly growing inside her chest. The night stretched on. When Nathan finally left, Grace remained on the balcony, watching his shadow fade into the darkness. She knew that from that moment, the line between pretending and truth had begun to dissolve. And deep within her, a quiet voice whispered, "Perhaps the most frightening thing isn't pretending to love, but beginning to love for real, in a marriage built on lies." From the perspective of a behavioral psychology expert, the story of Grace Carter is not merely a journey of transformation, but a lesson in self-worth that bridges two worlds, power and pain. She was not saved because of beauty or luck, but because she held on to her dignity even when every gaze looked down on her. It was that very dignity that made someone like Nathan Carter, a man who believed everything could be bought, begin to trust in something that cannot be priced: faith. In a society where wealth and reputation often overshadow humanity, Grace reminds us that sometimes true strength lies in kindness that needs no validation.